Welcome back, my beautiful people, to Short Stays, Big Dreams, the podcast where we explore the exciting world of travel, short-term rentals, the business of travel and short-term rentals, and everything in between. Today, I am super excited to have a true superstar in the industry. He is an experienced short-term rental operator, a a glamping innovator, and a real estate investor. One unique thing about our guest is that he has built a reputation of crafting creative ideas in the short-term rental world, specifically in the glamping world, um, and turning those ideas into successful business ventures. So whether you're crafting or thinking about unique stays, or like him navigating the real estate investing world, I firmly believe that his journey is going to offer you inspiration and practical advice for anyone looking to break into this particular industry. So before we get into the actual episode itself, let me just give you a quick rundown of what my goals are for this episode. Number one, I really want you to get to know who my guest is. I'm going to try to get into his brain and pull out all the knowledge and creativity that he has so that you can benefit from that. I also want to get into everything related to short-term rentals, but specifically the rise of glamping. And more importantly, I want to talk about how real estate investing can open doors for financial freedom for those that have the courage and the work ethic and the ability to really focus and dig deep into reaching that goal. Okay. Now, before we begin, do me a big favor, people. Grab your coffee or something to drink, grab a pad and paper, because I firmly believe you're going to get a lot of value out of this episode. So let me begin by introducing you to Garrett Brown. Garrett, welcome to the show, buddy.
Hey, everyone. Welcome. I'm very glad to be here and super honored to be joining with you. I know we're going to have a great conversation and really give some high-level insight to people interested in the short-term rental world and travel and everything and beyond.
Beautiful. Garrett, let's get started from the beginning. What inspired you to get into real estate investing and the short-term rental world?
So I've been in hospitality for a long time. I went to school for hotel management and waited tables for years. I was doing music at the same time. That's one of my big passions. I love being creative, and I was going further with that, and I started to realize that I needed something that I love music, but I looked around the music industry and I saw a lot of, rich people, but not really people that were wealthy. All the wealthy people that I knew were in real estate, most likely, or some type of big business adventure. So I started to dive a little further into the real estate world, thinking, how could I balance both of them? I got my license to be a real estate agent about 8 years ago, when I was probably about 25 years old, and I was still doing music, and I still have my license to be an agent to this day, but I don't use it as much now because I found the side of short-term rentals, which really opened my eyes to the creativity that could be brought into real estate and the investing side. One thing that I loved about my agent business was I'm not a real sales kind of person, which sometimes takes a little more of that to be successful in the agent business. But I was able to start working with real estate investors. I didn't know anything about real estate investing. All I thought of when I was thinking of real estate was buy and sell a house. But I got introduced to the investing side on one fateful day from someone randomly reaching out to me that asked if I worked with investors. I didn't at the time, but I was so eager. I was like, yes, of course I work with investors. And I went online. I found biggerpockets.com, which is kind of a, where I actually work now to this day. So 8 years later, it's kind of a wild how things come back around, but they taught me every single thing I knew about real estate investing. And one of the beauties of real estate investing is there's so many avenues that you can try. That, I tried flipping. I tried long-term buy and rental, buy and hold. I tried wholesaling. I was trying all different things, but and that's what's the beauty in it is I figured out what worked for me, and that's when I landed on short-term rentals. And I've been full force ever since then. Once I found the power of, vacation rentals, essentially being able to change my life and my family's life going forward.
Awesome, awesome. I love that story. And as I mentioned before we got on, I'm a big fan of what you've been doing, and what you've done. And like you, and probably like 90% of the people out there that's investing in real estate, I learned a lot through Bigger Pockets. And it's funny because when I found Bigger Pockets, Brandon Turner wasn't even on the show yet.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
I've been in this game a long time, right? Even before I even knew this was really a game, like the short-term rental industry. When I started many years ago, it was called as seasonal rentals, right? We didn't
Mhm.
didn't Airbnb didn't exist. Verbal had just started, but it was only specific to Aspen. Booking.com has always been in the game, but not to the extent that it is
Mhm.
now. But here in South Florida, we used to do seasonal rentals, and our clients were snowbirds and people that would come down here during the winter time. So that's how I got introduced into the short term rental game. But going back to Bigger Pockets, it's pretty cool, and it's like you just said, it goes full circle. It's I'm so proud of the fact and happy for you that you did uh, get on their staff now. It's pretty interesting. I love those people. I think they're a good tool, and you're an added plus to Bigger Pockets. So congratulations there.
Appreciate it.
Now,
I'm super happy to be there.
cool. Now let's talk about, because like you, I own or I have a real estate license. We do have a division in sales, but where was that shift? You got that client that was an investor. You started working with him, but let's dive deep into that. What about that specifically, or what did you learn? What lessons did you learn about that, and then what guided you to, or what drove you and guided you to the STR side?
So I love telling this story because it's something I like to remind people that one moment of you just saying yes can sometimes change your life, and it may not be instantly. Like some people think like, oh, everything has to happen so fast, and they're just so worried about the next step. But so I'll tell the story of how I even got into the investing side. So I got an email one day randomly from someone. I don't still to this day don't know how they found me. I live in Houston, Texas. He was a new investor. He had moved from Mexico City. He was saying he was looking to invest in properties and had a construction business in Mexico City. And this is what he came to Houston to particularly do. We met at a coffee shop. I vetted him a little bit just to make sure how serious he was. But again, I knew nothing about real estate investing at this time, which is a totally different beast than buying and selling residential real estate. They don't teach you a lot of these things in real estate school. Like I learned contracts, but real life experience just comes from going out there and putting your feet on the pavement and talking to people. So I met with him at a coffee shop. He explained to me what he was looking for, gave me some real good insight that I had no knowledge of, and of how investors look at properties, what the ARV needs to be, and their percentage rules. This was 2016, so the investing game was a little bit different than it is now. But like I said, I went online. I met with him and told him like, absolutely, I'm going to work on this, and I took that moment and started researching, found Bigger Pockets, dove in there, learned a ton over there, just started doing my own analysis constantly. And I kind of got obsessed with seeing what the deals were out there and what we could, 'cause again, my creativity always comes into play when I'm thinking of things. And I would see deals and I'd go, okay, like I knew, being an agent, you have a lot of data that a lot of, the consumer public doesn't have. And so I was really starting to push some of these numbers, and I was getting, and I got really good on the investor side. I started calling for sale by owners. I started driving for dollars, and I'm looking all over the place for basically dilapidated houses, and I'm passing them over to investors, and they're making 80 grand, 90 grand here. And this was a little bit in the golden era of times when you could find properties in Houston like that. Not as easy anymore, but still there. But I started seeing how well they were doing, and I was spending so much time learning that I got to the point now that I was like, man, they're getting these deals, and a lot of them are coming because I'm doing the work, and I'm also getting paid, but I'm not getting paid like they are. So finally, saying yes to that and saying yes to many opportunities. Eventually, maybe 2 or 3 years into that. I can't remember exactly. I was showing a client a residential home. It was, nothing out of the ordinary that I was doing regular. And I saw a for sale by owner sign. And this was in an area that I had a lot of knowledge in. I grew up in this area. I mean, I always tell people, like, if you're keen on investing, one of the best places to start is in the hometown you grew up in, because that's where a lot of your connections are going to be. And you're going to know that area like the back of your hand, probably. So I'm going, I'm checking these places out with one of my residential clients, and we drove, we're leaving a place, and she loved it. And as I'm driving away, I see a for sale by owner sign. And that was one thing I'm not a big cold calling person. It's not my favorite thing, or not many people's favorite thing to do, but for sale by owners, I always called them because I knew that they were at least interested in selling. And if I could just present them with some options, they may be open for that. I got cussed out a few times calling people, and that's just part of the game. So
that is part of the game.
That's part of the game. So we're driving away. I see the for sale by owner sign. I pull over and I call them. And they happened to be in the house, and the owners were in the house clearing it out. And I knew the area very well because, like, again, this was my backyard of sorts. I called them, and they were like, yeah, you can come in and check it out. Like, we can talk, like, we're here right now. Just come in and check it out. Went and checked it out. It needed some cosmetic work, but it wasn't bad at all. And I asked them, I said, what do y'all want for the place? And they're like, we're asking 115. And I was like, and I knew because of my knowledge in real estate and it being my backyard, I was like, this place, wholesale, which if people don't know what wholesale is when, if I took it, and just me as an agent or investor or whatever, and just cleaned up maybe the grass and a few other small minor things, I could probably put it on the MLS and probably get about 150 for it, even with the seller. And I presented that option to them. And I said, hey, like, we can list this for that, or I have a partner, and I didn't at the time. I just knew of some people that might be interested, I was like, I have somebody that they would probably buy this cash and if you wanted it. And I didn't think in a million years that they were going to go, oh yeah, we'll take the 115 instead, because people always get so caught up with like, oh, it's always got to be the highest price. It's always got to be the highest price. But what I learned is that all sellers, you got to find what their pain points were. And so I asked them, I go, why are you selling? Like, that's one of the main questions I always ask people no matter what, because there's always a bigger reason than just money. Like, that's obviously one of the main reasons, but this couple in particular, they were ready to be done with it. They'd moved to a totally different place. They were trying to go travel. They were selling a few of their rentals around, and they didn't want us to do showings. They didn't want to do any fixes, like dealing with the public. And they were like, if you can close within a week and give us cash, like we will do it. And I immediately called one of the investors that I worked with, and said, hey, I have a deal. I didn't have the money, but I want to partner with you. And we partnered with it. They brought the cash, I brought the deal, and I did a lot of the, it was just cosmetic, so it wasn't anything major. I kind of went over a lot of the construction things because I'd learned so much from working with so many investors and my time of just researching YouTube University and all those places. And we ended up closing that deal, and we ended up put about $50,000 into the property that the partner supplied. And then we sold it for, I think, $245 a month and a half later. And because I'm an agent, we saved on commissions and things like that. And then we split the profit 50-50. I think we both walked away with, maybe $30,000 a piece. When that really, really sparked me to go further with my investing journey. But I also say that to say my first deal might have been a solid one, but I had a few failures after that in the flipping world. It wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, but it's never gonna, but I learned from every single thing. Like, one of my next deals after that, I learned that, we had a deal and it was going to be a slam dunk and it was almost closing. And then a long lost brother came out of nowhere to claim title on it. And if people don't know about that, like, title issues are like one of the worst things you can deal with in real estate. And so we had to let the deal go. And then I had a few more instances like that with my flipping business, where it was like one or two things out of my control that, just didn't make the deals go right. And so I was like, okay, I need to try. I like flipping, and I learned a lot. Rehabs are always really good to know about. But I was like, I want to try, maybe buy and hold, or even like, this is when the Airbnb was really starting to make its trends, like 2018, 2018. And I was like, maybe I was like, maybe I'll try that. And so it just happened from always saying yes to things is one of my favorite phrases, because I took on a very small rental maybe 2 years before that it was near my house. My broker calls me and she goes, hey, we have an investor client that's just trying to rent out a condo. It was like $1,000 a month, right? Nothing like in the real estate world, that commission's very small, and it takes, but I said yes to it because I was a newer agent still then. And I was like, I'll take it. I met the guy. We had a great relationship. I rented out his property 2 years over, which, wasn't much. But me developing those relationships, about 2 to 3 years later, when he had a tenant at the end of it just leave with a couple months left on their lease, and he was kind of like, you know what, I'm over this condo. He owned two others in the same building, and they were small regular condos, and he was like, I think I'm ready to sell them, and they were, I think, $70,000 a piece, and I was like, if you want to sell them to me, I would gladly take them and take over them and, operate them from there. And he sold them to me for $60,000 a piece. I used conventional loans to get all three, kind of a smaller portfolio loan actually. And we got them, we put them on Airbnb, and we were renting them out. We were making, $1,000 or $2,000 a month on each one, and it was going good. But then pandemic hit. And this is also when Airbnb really, really started to explode with, institutional money coming into, especially in Houston. Like at that point, all the condos started popping up on Airbnb. And at that point, it's just a race to the bottom with your pricing. You're pretty much just like, who has the lowest price? Because I didn't understand that building the experience is really the key in short-term rental world. So at that point, we were doing okay, but I knew that I was ready to shift to something bigger. And this was 2021. And glamping was really starting to get popular on YouTube. And it's been popular in Europe for years, but America, which doesn't happen often in some of these trends, was actually really behind on this. And so I saw the niche starting to pop up, and I knew I was near Houston, and I was looking around, and there was nothing really unique on Airbnb. And we're the third or fourth largest city in America. And so I sold the condos, and this is a big bet on myself. And people, one reason I was successful in this area was because I was willing to make a big sacrifice for a year. I sold my 3 Airbnbs. I sold my primary residence. It was just a smaller townhome I was living in. And I was still working in real estate and my music studio, but I decided to buy land about an hour away from Houston in a semi vacation destination area. It was a place I grew up going to on the lake with my family, and it was near a national forest. And I was like, I think I'm gonna take a chance, and I used an owner-occupied loan. This is where the sacrifice came in. And most people, they think investment properties, you're like, oh, you have to put 20% down every single time, or 15% on some of them. But I used an owner-occupied loan for 5% down. I bought a house with 10 acres on it, which was, it's been coined land hacking. But the reason I was able to get that, people think of land and they're like, you have to have cash to get land, and which is true. So that's the trick I used, was finding a house that had the land on it that I could use an actual mortgage on, and they were willing to lend on. And when you do that and you live in the property for a year, you can put 5% down, or even lower on some, in a FHA, or even, I think, even conventional now. Definitely not a lender, so don't hold me to that. But I used that, and the cash I reserved from not having to put 20% down on an investment property, I used most of that to build my first unique short-term rental, which is a geodesic dome. And it was very hard to get, you can't get financing on some of these unique properties, especially when you're newer, because I didn't have the proof of concept. And I was telling people basically like, hey, I want to build this glamping site, but all they're hearing is you just want to put up a tent and try to charge people $500 a night. And I'm like, that's not exactly it. But I knew I knew the business plan was there. I knew that the unique stay was there. And my hospitality background, I was going to be able to manage it like a hotel of sorts, and provide that kind of comfort in the middle of nature. And so the only person that took me serious was my mom, and we went 50-50 partners on the property we needed a little extra cash to get some things in place. But I went in with a vision, and I knew my end goal was to have, maybe 4 or 5 small cabins, unique cabins on this property, and take this same business model to other markets that, I know well, or I know will perform well. And to this day, I think we've been operating now for about 2 years. We put about $200,000 into the property, but we make now gross revenue. We make about $260,000, and the net income is about $100,000 a year. So we've almost paid back most of our debt that we had. Besides our mortgage, we pay that each month. Well, the guest pays that, which is the beauty of it, because I don't live in that house now. You only have to live in it for 1 year.
Right.
After I was done building it, I moved into a different house, and now we rent that house out too as a vacation rental. So we have a whole operation going on there. And the house is the equity play. Like, one thing that I don't want people to get confused. And I also I love my geodome, but I would probably never build another one, because I think the real secret sauce is building a unique cabin that has more equity value.
Let me stop you there, because I got to go back on a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And we're going to touch on that, because that is a good statement that you just made. So,
yeah.
But let me go back a little bit on your journey here, right?
Sure.
A couple of key things you said that I took notes on, and I need the listeners to understand, right? One of the key points that he just mentioned, when he started and got into the game, he did so, and he recommends, just like I do, that you do so in your backyard, right? I hear some people, some experts, and will say, get into a market that you can get into. And oftentimes in these markets are areas that are far away from you because of the entry point.
Yeah.
But people, I think that's a mistake. If you have if you're from Fort Lauderdale, and back then, I can tell you, back in 2012, 13, and 14, a lot of people were talking about investing in Jacksonville, Southern Georgia. But I'm not from there, never been there, didn't know anything about that. So although the entry point was less, I stuck to my backyard, right? And I firmly believe you should do the same if you're brand new. It's going to alleviate a lot of the headaches than doing stuff remote. I always give the story, and I done a couple of videos on this recently, of David Green. David Green being a former member of Bigger Pockets, who was one of those individuals that always preach, go into markets that may have a lower entry point, but a lot of upside. And he went into Jacksonville. And if you know his story, or if you don't know it, go to one of my videos that I talked about it. Man, he learned a hard lesson by doing that, because he didn't have the right people in place to sustain that kind of work. So hindsight being 2020, if you were to ask him today, he would not have done that unless he had the right people in place. And I don't recommend you do that. I recommend you stay within your farm. So that's one thing I want to talk about that you mentioned. Is there something else you want to add before we move on to the next thing you talked about?
No, I mean, you hit it on the head. You don't realize how much, I don't want to discourage people, but there's a lot of work and a lot of, especially when you're a smaller operation, you can't always afford to hire somebody to do some things. And there's some things you're going to have to be involved with, because nobody's going to care about your property as much as you. To get to those bigger markets and travel out a little more, I suggest the same thing. Start in your backyard or somewhere closer to you, so you can learn nuances of building a team, building operations, building systems. Because now that I've been doing it for quite a few years, I am way more confident if I did go to a market that is, in a different state. But I still am not gonna, I'm in Texas. I'm not gonna go invest in New York or Maine or something at this point, because I don't know the nuances to that. Unless I can just get a screaming deal, I want to stick to something that I know a little bit more about the weather. I know how, I don't know anything about snow plowing. I don't so it's as I grow, I agree with you 100%. Learn your systems, learn your operations, and then expanding to different markets later on will be much, much easier, and you won't have that headache that will fall through the cracks that when you start investing in other markets just off the bat. It's a lot tougher than people think.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, and like you said, you don't want to discourage people, but I'm a true believer that I want you to know the truth. Right?
Yes.
There is a dark side to real estate investing. It is not a get rich quick scheme. And it does take a long time to really build wealth, right?
Yeah.
Especially if you don't have the capital to do so. Now, we're going to talk about capital in a second, but right now, what I want to talk about and go back to your first STR, you know, walk me through that. Was that the condos, or
Yep.
was that the land you bought and you built your geodome? Which one was your first STR?
The condos were first. Those were in about 2018, and I had 3 just plain Jane condos in a decent area of Houston, with nothing special, no design, no like I think I got the couches from Big Lots, and like it was just a simple plain Airbnb, which at that time still could work. And now it's much harder to do that because just hosts and operators in general have stepped their game up so much. That's when I realized that I needed to make a change to get as profitable as I want. Because I've always thought that each STR, they really take about the same amount of time. Like I spend the same amount on my guests on the ones that make $50K a year as the ones that make $150K a year. And so I started to realize like I need something that is like still gonna like have the same amount of time to it, but it's just much more profitable or has a higher upside to make revenue.
Yeah, correct. And correct me if I'm wrong. If I heard you correctly, that was back in 2018, right?
Yep.
Okay. Those that are my subscribers and my followers, what have I always said? From 2015 all the way to 2022, didn't matter what short-term rental you had, you were going to make money out of it, right?
Yep.
That was the golden years of short-term rentals, right?
Yep.
You had a average, a condo, nothing fancy, nothing unique about it, but he did well with them. When I got into this game back early on in 2010, everything I put up on Airbnb was doing phenomenal.
Yeah.
Even because I house hacked, even a bedroom.
Smart.
Yeah, even a bedroom in my house was doing great returns.
Yeah.
Today, the game has changed. We're going to talk about that change in a little bit. But, okay, Garrett, you went from the condo. Now, if I heard you correctly, you sold those and then bought the land, or you kept them and then bought the land?
Sold it and I cashed out on the little bit of equity I had. It wasn't anything crazy. And then I sold them at the right time, which when one thing about being an agent was I knew the market was super hot and everybody was just trying to buy whatever they could. So I sold the 3 condos, sold each one of them for $82,000 or around in there. And then I sold my townhouse, which I bought at like $120, and I did some small renovations while I lived there, and I ended up selling that for like $180. And so I took that probably about $100,000. Got matched $100,000 from my mom. We took that money and then pretty much put it all into that Glamp side, which is now, we've tripled or doubled that investment at least. We're probably worth $1.3 million at this point. So
that's phenomenal. So now let's talk about that deal, right?
Yeah.
And so we're going to talk about now in terms of what he did with the land, right? And he mentioned he bought the land. He actually lived in the land, right? And as a newbie investor, if you're looking to get into this game, for me, and Garrett, tell me if you agree with this. For me, the best way to do it is through some type of hack, either a house hack, and in his case, a land hack, right? Because you can get into those deals with very little money, and in the process, live for free, or better yet, live for free and make money at the same time, right?
Yep.
In addition to that, when you do that, you really get to know what it is to be a landlord, what it is to be a real estate investor, and then you can decide whether it's for you or not. Because a lot of people jump in, they sell everything. They're going to be these great investors. They start buying properties, not even realizing if they're going to like it or not, right?
Yes.
So that's important. So let's talk about that process. You bought it. You were going to live in it for a little bit. Now, what you lived in the actual what's you consider the cabin or the house, and then you put the geodome, right?
Yep. And you so you hit a great point though too. I I tried so many different things within real estate that I knew I was ready to go all in on the glamping side, because I knew that's what I liked and I knew that's where my passion was going to be. So if you're going to jump all into something, I would try, test out a few little waters, even if you're just analyzing deals. I was analyzing deals every day. And so that helped me know that I was ready to make that big commitment to building this property and, putting a lot of cash into it. But I knew it'd work I tried so many things and I learned what didn't work. And not every, people sometimes fail in certain things and they just get so upset and, nothing's ever going to work for me. But I took every single loss or failure that I took as a learning lesson, knowing like, okay, this is not particularly for me. I'm not going to make that mistake again. I'm going to go on to something that each time I was able to narrow down like what I think was going to work and what was going to make me happy. I want to have fun with the things I'm doing. And that's how I ended up where I'm at with that.
Awesome. And great lesson, people. There's two things that you have to have if you want to be successful, or at least I firmly believe. Number one is you have to have work ethic. You have to have the desire to want to work your butt off. And one of the ways you get that desire is doing something you love, doing something you like. Hence why I'm a big fan of house hacking, because it's going to you have to live someplace.
Yeah.
So might as well live someplace that's going to help you either build wealth and help you decide if this is the avenue you want to go to. Because if it doesn't work out, you still have your home, right?
Yeah.
You still can stay there, right? And then forget that and move on to whatever other project you want. But it gives you that ability, and you don't lose out because you're in something that again, you have to live someplace. So that's a big plus. Now, you bought that property, you moved in there, and you decided my first STR that I'm going to do within that property is going to be this geodome. Why the geodome? And walk me through that process as to, what made you narrow it down to that specific item.
Yeah. So when I was looking into what to do, there's a myriad of options you can do when you're glamping. You can have a safari tent, you can have a yurt, you can, geodomes are very popular, shipping containers are popular. I was seeing all what was out there, and the two things that I did that I think of why my geodome was so successful is I researched the market in my area. You looked in Austin, Texas, which is almost, I don't want to call it the glamping hub of the U.S. Maybe Tennessee has probably something to say about that. But Austin has a ton of glamping, which is 3 hours away from us, a major city. But they had all types of data that I could pull to see like, all right, what are some of their better performing properties? The geodomes usually seem to be better performing than some of the other ones. I looked in my area and there was one yurt not far from the area I was putting up in, but there was not a geodome anywhere nearby. And I was like, okay, interesting. I went and stayed at some different glamping sites, which is something I always recommend anybody looking to build something unique and, just trying to figure out this type of business and short-term rentals in general. Is go stay at some of these sites and see what you like about it and don't like about it from your own guest experience. So, because some geodomes are, some glamping sites, I keep saying geodome sites, but glamping sites, they'll come up with, they'll have a structure and like they'll put 10 domes right next to each other or 10 different yurts right by each other. And I went and stayed at some of these places and I was like, it's okay, but it's not the experience I would want as a guest, especially paying $500 a night. But then I stayed at some sites that were, more private and they had maybe one geodome, one unique stay, like a tree house maybe over here. Maybe they had a yurt as well, but it was way more spaced out. And I was like, okay, this feels more like something I would like as a guest and I would pay top dollar for. So I stayed at those sites and realized like, okay, I want less is more for me personally. And then it's just the honest thing. Like I thought the geodomes just looked the best. Like I thought if I'm scrolling on Insta, I'm a big market person and social media guy. I thought if I'm scrolling online and I saw a yurt versus a geodome versus a shipping container versus, treehouse is probably the one that I couldn't afford it, to be honest with you. Otherwise, I would have loved to build that. But a geodome, the price point was something I could get into. It was about $20,000 for my geodome. We spent another, $80,000 between utilities and bathrooms and tile and other things like that. But I just thought that, my experience, I liked staying in the geodomes more than yurts and things. And my personal preference, I just thought they looked the coolest, and so I went with that. And I figured other people would share that sentiment. Some people love shipping containers, and I know some people that crush it with shipping containers. I personally don't like them. There's some designs I've seen that are amazing, but just the plain Jane shipping containers that people have retrofitted into have insides and stuff. Just my personal preference. I was like, oh, it's okay. It's not as appealing as the Geodome, and that was one of my main things because I knew that me as a marketing person, if I try to vision it from the guest mind. If they're scrolling on Instagram and they're in a market and they see a unique stay that is like a Geodome or my mirror house or things, they're going to stop scrolling because it's super unique. And then as they click in, the thing that's going to get them the book is the amenities I put in behind it. I have really unique amenities too. I knew that the outdoor space is going to be the thing that sells this and is able to get me that super high price point. I put in a hot tub. I put in a sauna. People thought I was crazy to put in a sauna near Houston, Texas, because it's basically a sauna when you walk outside. But I knew that these amenities were going to be something nobody else was really doing. Even hot tubs, people like in Houston are like, what do you need a hot tub for? It's like, no, those amenities get me to that $500 dollar a night price point. So as I was starting to see, like when I was going to other places, I knew what I wanted to provide, and I knew what was going to keep guests to actually book and give us a steady supply of occupancy rates that are just like, we're beating the market tremendously. And like, you can look at AirDNA, which I love, and all these data sites, but they're not always going to tell you the full picture if you know that you can beat the experience that's being provided in that area. Nobody in my area was providing any kind of unique experience, and our AirDNA said we were going to make like $30,000 a year, and we made $100K on each one of our small tiny homes the first year, just because we know marketing and we knew what people want to see when they're booking a unique experience.
Great point there. And there's two things I want to touch on that you just said. The first, but before I do that, and you kind of touch on it, but I want to really dive deep into this part about it. And you picked the Geodome not only because of the entry point, but because you felt it's going to provide a better experience, right?
Yes.
Now, tell me why do you think that is?
I have other people, I don't think many people would debate this with me, but it's also probably the harder part is one of the reasons I bought my land. I looked at places for like 8 months. One reason I bought my land is because it had a massive pond in the middle of the land that I knew. The thing I saw with a lot of these places is the most popular ones had either an incredible view or some type of water feature near it. And so the Geodome thing that I like, yurts, if people don't really know them, they can look them up, but they're pretty much, encapsulated with not many windows, and they're, kind of dark and dreary. Same with shipping containers. They can be fixed up a little bit, but the Geodome, the thing I loved about it, it has this massive, massive window. And then it overlooks this pond I have, which people think is a lake, and they say that all the time. I'm like, it's not a lake, but if you think it's a lake, that's awesome to know. And I knew that view feature, the area I'm in, we're not in the Smoky Mountains. We don't have these crazy terrains, and like we have a little bit of hills in our area, but nothing spectacular. But I knew that view was going to be something people would pay for. And then the pictures were going to look just stunning when I, got drone shots, and it's like, you see this Geodome and there's a body of water right behind it, which is just an acre pond, which are very common in Texas, but people think it's a lake. And, so it's like that water feature was something I wanted to highlight. And I knew the window was just going to be the selling point. People love light. They're going out. I wanted to blend nature and the inside, like they're not going out there to just hang inside the house. They book because the house is cool, but they're going there to be in nature. And so I wanted to blend those the best I could. I felt like some of these other stays didn't blend the nature seamlessly, which is another reason why I have my mirror house as well, which is our highest performing one, because
I want to talk about that, but let's finish talking about the Geo.
Sure. I was saying, just the windows alone, like I love blending nature and making it feel like it's seamless together. That is my goal with any property I buy now or build that I do.
Okay. Yes. I'm gonna 100% agree with everything you just said. And I'm going to give you my perspective on this, right? Like you, I firmly believe that number one, and we touched on it again, but it's important to emphasize in today's short-term rental market, you have to stand out.
Yes.
You have
Yes.
to provide a unique experience.
Yes.
And it has to be an exceptional hospitality experience.
Yes.
Now, I, like you, I'm a big fan of the geodomes. We're building our own site now.
Nice.
We do have some cottages for a couple resort cottages. In the cottages, though, they're also built with a big front window.
Yes.
They're built inside the,
Yes.
because we want the lights.
Yes.
And then, but more importantly, where we spend our money is not on the interior of the structure, it's on the exterior.
Nailing it.
Your bang for your ROI
Yes.
is so much greater if you really do your exterior right
Yes.
than anything you can do on the inside, right?
Yep. 100%.
Yes, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's one of the things that I try to emphasize with my clients when they team up with us and they want to invest in a short-term rental, and they, for some reason, that part doesn't click until I show them the numbers, right?
Yep.
You can have an average, like I'm going to give you an example. When I first got into this industry many, many years ago, just like a lot of people, I had the misconception of thinking that my property needs to be huge, it needs to be on the beach,
Yep.
it needs to be super luxurious in order for that property to do well. With experience and with time, I realized, man, I was way off. And man, it's the total opposite,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Now, when I look at a property to invest in, I want a small property, right?
Yep.
I don't want these 4, 5, 6-bedroom homes anymore. They're not, the return on those isn't there. So I want a small property, but it's imperative that the outdoor allows me to create a phenomenal outdoor experience. Like
Yep.
you mentioned, the jacuzzi. The ROI on a jacuzzi is insane.
Insane.
Yeah.
Every place has to have a jacuzzi and string lights. If you don't have both
Yes.
of those features, it's over.
Yes. So we are currently so I have a vineyard in Georgia
Oh, nice.
that we're creating in my opinion, a phenomenal outdoor experience, right? We have trails, we have mountain bike trails, horseback biking trails. It's on a vineyard, so especially during March all the way to June, when the grapes are harvesting and they're growing. I mean, it's just a beautiful sight. If you're sitting in the geodome and looking out that big ass window, you're going to see this beautiful vineyard, and we're locating them so that you can see the sunrise as it comes up.
Nice. That's exactly what we did too.
Yeah. So anyways, so that's a big plus. And I'm glad you realized that early on and you actually implemented that, and you're proof of concept, right?
Yep.
I tell people, sometimes you tell someone something and they're like, maybe not, but you is proof of concept. Your concept is great. I have a good friend of mine. He owns Timbercraft tiny homes out of Alabama. He created a couples resort, and we're trying to do a project together as well.
Nice.
But he has that proof of concept as well, right? When he built his tiny home, he doesn't really. We call it a cottage because there's a misconception when you say tiny home.
Yeah.
You're thinking about a place where you can actually live in. We're not building that. We're building something for someone to come in a few days, max 5 days or a week. We don't have kitchens. We only have kitchenettes.
Yep.
But we have phenomenal outdoor areas.
Yep.
Barbecue, fireplaces, jacuzzi. We're creating one of the properties has a nice gym. We have a yoga studio.
Nice.
Like my property in Georgia, it's going to have mountain biking trails, ATV trails, horseback riding trails, stuff for the outside. Those amenities, the return on your investment is going to be much higher when you provide phenomenal amenities. And I'm glad you talked about that. Want to see part 2 of this podcast? Don't forget to subscribe.